5:15 on Monday, January 29th, and the Carroll City Council meeting is now in session. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please note everyone's in attendance. We're going to move our meeting around a little bit tonight. Our labor attorney won't be here till 6, and PFM, Susan, won't be here till 6:30. So we'll start with the Carroll City Council Communications Commission fiscal year 2019 budget request. And Mike.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Kind of out of the work session that we had with the council on our annual planning session, one of the items that came up was a discussion about the Communications Center and the Communication Commission. The Communication Commission did meet recently and did recommend approval, or did approve, the fiscal year 2019 budget request, and we did request some representatives from the county to come and discuss that with the council tonight. So we have Chairman Gene Miners here, along with Sheriff Ken Pingree, and then Jason Huffman, who is the Communications Center Supervisor, Director? Sure. And so with that, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Miners.
Yeah, I think tonight is going to do the copy of the budget, and I guess what I'd like to do is...
You know what, Gene, I'm sorry. We'll probably have you come right up here. There was no way the microphone's up there. Sorry about it. Sorry.
Anyway, we've got, you guys got a copy of the budget and everything like that. And I think I've got Jason Huffman here. He's basically the operations person and director. And he has some figures there, and I'm going to let him come up and present because he works with them every day versus what I do. If you have any questions for myself or the sheriff, we'll be free.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. I appreciate the city council letting us come in and speak with you today. I do have some of those figures. I believe, Mike, I think the original budget, we had approved some amendments to what we worked on, so I think the copy that you gave the council was a little out of date, so I have new copy
Okay.
and some other charts that we can look at. So. Thank you. Just a minute to get those around. While we do that, I'm going to mention a little bit about what's going on in the Communications Center. As the Communications Director, Communications Supervisor, I'm also the 911 Coordinator for the 911 Board. So we've got several things that we work on those two fronts in a joint effort between the Communications Center and the 911 Board. Some of those things that included grants and things like that that have been beneficial to the city of Carroll and other communities within the county. Most recently, this last fiscal year, we obtained a grant to fund a radio project to replace all the law enforcement radios in the county. And so the Carroll Police Department was able to take advantage of that. So the 911 Board covered part of that cost, the grant covered part of that cost, and the city of Carroll covered part of that cost as well. And what we're hoping to do is prepare for a statewide radio system that is being built out in the state right now, be active later this calendar year. And we're looking to improve our communications by moving, hopefully, at least the Carroll Police Department, because the tower is going to be located in the outside of town, so it should give an extra incredible radio coverage. So we're hoping to be able to move their communications to that system once it becomes live, and we're able to evaluate the coverage and make sure that it's everything that the state's promising it to be. As funds become available, it makes sense to move other public safety agencies to that system. We're going to investigate that further. In addition to that, the Communications Center continues to work on important projects, hardening our own infrastructure. So one of the concerns that we had is a backup plan for the communication center if there was a catastrophic event. We were no longer able to occupy the courthouse where the communication center is located. What do we do in that situation? So right now we're in the process of developing an evacuation plan, updating that, and being more proactive in that area. And the 911 board is in the middle of, has already approved the procurement of some backup computer equipment that will be located off-site, that our current computer databases and servers will be replicated to, so that should that computer system that we have now in the courthouse were to fail for whatever reason, we've got backups to rely on, be located in a different location to get some geo-separation to make that a better situation. Additionally, we can, I guess, move into the budget that we passed around. Not a whole lot of change here as far as from last year to this year. We have a total 4.1% increase in what we budgeted for in this current fiscal year. Most of that increase is due to 2.5% increase to wages, anticipated insurance expenses that will increase, both due to the annual increases of insurance experiences and some change in personnel. We had a longtime dispatcher retire. He was on an employee plus one plan. His replacement's on a family plan, so that adjusts the amount that we'll have to spend on insurance in that area. Other than that, very modest increases across the board for the rest of that. So any questions about anything I mentioned, the budget at all?
Yeah, I happened to walk in on a conversation when they were talking about the communities and what they have to pay for this. And so I asked for a printout of the amount. I don't quite understand it. I need to have you explain to me why Carroll pays separately, plus with the county taxes, and all the other cities in the county don't have to pay.
Well, I can't answer why they decided to set that up when they created the agreement. In 1987, when they were originally agreed upon. Why they set that up that way, I can't speak to. I think I was 7 at that time. If makes anybody feel old, I'm sorry. But, so I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is some of the figures that I've gathered, and we watched these figures over the course of several years now. They really don't change proportionally from one year to the next. They're pretty much the same. Even when call volume goes up, our call volume this year is a little higher than it has been. Kind of saw a steep increase, but even so, the proportions have remained the same. So if you go to the next page after the budget, I've included some pie charts, and the council will have to accept my apologies for death by pie chart here, but I think that the pie chart represents this discussion in the best way to kind of understand the figures. So the first one is 2017 calls for service by location, and that shows calls for service coming from the city of Carroll being 70% of our call volume. You can see that 3% is the city of Coon Rapids, I believe 5% is the city of Manning, and all other calls for service come from other areas throughout the county or in areas covered by our communication center that are actually outside of the county. So we actually dispatch for fire districts that overlap county boundaries, particularly in the Manning, Coon Rapids, and Breed areas. And so we've kind of lumped those all together. If we were to split them out, it becomes very granular and hard to look at for a lot of the small communities that don't have a very high call volume. If you go to the next page, we have another pie chart that talks about the law enforcement call volume. So one of the arguments I've heard in the past is about times they have law enforcement, police departments on their own, and how that kind of shakes out. So if we're looking at just the law enforcement call volume, again, we're at 70% for the city of Carroll, 22% for the rest of the county, 3% and 5% respectively for the Manning and Coon Rapids Police Departments. Sorry, switch that around. The Coon Rapids is 3%, Manning 5%. And then we have 54 calls that were law enforcement calls that took place outside of our county boundaries that we assisted with in some way, shape, or form. So I show you those graphs so that we can look at the next page, which is entitled Fiscal Year 2019 Budget Sources. This is only referring to the communication center budget. So we're only dealing with the operations budget. We're not dealing with any 911 funds, which are a separate account and go to pay for different things. The comm center's budget is mainly personnel, office expenses and that sort of thing, things that aren't able to be covered under the code statute for the 911 fund. And the pie chart is 50% the city of Carroll in blue. That represents the half of the communication center budget paid for by the city of Carroll. The other half represents, based on the taxable valuation of the Carroll County tax asking, we've broken up their half into a proportionate percentage of the comm center's budget based on that taxable valuation. And at that taxable valuation, we can see that of the county's portion, we're dealing with 18 and some change percent. So if we add up the city of Carroll's half of their of the comm center budget and the other side, we get 68%. And we'll recall that when we talked about calls for service based either on department or on location, 70% of those calls were Carroll. So I don't know if these figures have remained the same since 1988, and this is what they looked at that time, but this is the facts of the matter today.
This is actually the chart that kind of bothers me. If 50% of your income is from Carroll, from the city taxpayers, and the other side is the amount of money that you get from the county taxpayers, which our citizens pay again.
Right.
The part that I'm wondering why is, in the city part, why aren't all the other cities, like they are here in the county part, into the city part to make it fair and even? Because it looks like we're getting taxed by the city and through the county, and the other cities are taxed just through the county.
Sure.
That's my question. I guess I'm asking you,
Right.
what's the reason for that?
I can't speak to that because I wasn't involved with the agreement. I've been in the position for 4 years, and so that's all I can speak to is what we do currently.
Do you think it'd be worth reviewing that then?
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of looking at.
That would be up to the city council. I mean, if the city council were to, the agreement between the county and the city is mutually agreed upon agreement, and if one entity wanted to revisit stuff, I guess that's up to
But it just seems to me, by the population or so, it's more fair.
by population.
Well, or, that the cities would get taxed by, their city tax, not just through the county tax. And we're getting taxed both times. Gene, you were going to mention something?
Yeah.
Well, and nobody knows why this was set up this way. This was set up when the communications board was set up, see, and I don't know that answer. We did revisit this issue. Ken and I was talking about it, and we can't recall, but it was been 4 or 5 years or 6 years ago, how time gets away. And we looked at all the different ways that different comm centers our size are funded. And they're funded all different ways. There's some done the same way we are. I can't remember the exact what county, but there's other counties where the county seat paid half and the county paid half. Now, I know what you're saying is that those cities are probably not paying anything, but if they were to do anything, it probably should be then the county should get less, if you look at based on services. And I guess we just been able to keep, everybody's been happy the way it has been. I don't know that there's all different kinds of formulas out there you can do it with. But I remember we visited once here in the last 6 years ago, and it was decided to leave it the way it was, because we looked at the different ways that it's done, and that's it. But the reason why it was done this way, I do not know. That's way before my time.
So my question would be, would you be willing to go into some type of, city administration or some council members and talk about this a little more? To me, it seems not fair.
Since I've been mayor for 2 years, and I kind of got thrown into the first meeting I went. And at the time, the city manager kind of gave me a heads up. I can't remember. Brad, were you?
Yes.
You were there the first meeting, and I think the concern is kind of like what you've addressed, Vern, is the citizen in the city. We live both in the city and in the county. And as a city taxpayer, I pay twice, because I got to pay county taxes and I got to pay city taxes. So I'm paying twice for the comm center. If I live in Coon Rapids, I only pay once, or I live in Manning, I pay once, because I'm just getting assessed on the county side, not the city side.
Right.
And
I think
understand
that's,
where
yeah.
you're coming from, but if you look at based on usage,
Yeah, and there's,
the same.
right, and there's different ways to look at how
Right.
things are used. And so, again, I had that question with the previous city manager, and I said, okay. But then it was understood to me that the service has to be there anyway. You have to have the service. You cannot not have the service.
That's right.
So, in essence, again, I go back to that individual that lives in town, in Carroll, pays twice. The cities of Coon and Breda, Arcadia, they only have to pay once. And I grant, again, you look at usage, I get that, but the service still has to be available for them too. So,
And it's-
where do you start making that
The
up?
same argument is true when you look at the small communities that are paying county or county law enforcement. The city's paying for it, they're also paying for it.
Right, we pay for the sheriff's department too, I get that.
And not everything's better than what reward games, they say.
I get that, Gina.
I didn't
Right.
set this up.
Right.
But what I'm saying is based on usage, and there's other services that we're providing for you through the comm center also. I mean, the police department, their phone system is 24/7 through the comm center.
And I think that, those citizens that have some concern, I think they have to understand the fair and equitable part too. And so, and again, I've never seen the agreement, and maybe that's something maybe that's the first start, is to look, why was this set up that way? If there's another method to do it that's kind of fair and equitable to everybody, because as this budget's going to go up, all budgets do, we're going to pay more and more and more. And it's, the city, we still are responsible to the city taxpayer, saying, hey, somewhere along the line, we got to have a timeout here. Jason, and I know the equipment changes, we got to keep up with that. I get that, and I understand that part. Yeah.
If it hasn't been
So-
looked at for a number of years, maybe it is time to sit back and take a look at it.
And maybe nothing will come of it too.
Yeah, and I can't answer for that because I'm
Right.
not one member of the board.
Right.
Right.
And I don't think you were I don't think you were supervisor when they did this in '87, were you?
When they established this?
Yeah, no, yeah.
So high school, what you do?
It should be made clear, and I've had the same discussion with other Carroll taxpayers too, city taxpayers. And this is a valid concern that I'd like to see revisited also, but it should be made very clear. We appreciate your services. You're doing a great job. This has nothing to do with the performance of either the county's administration of or your and your team, Jason's work
Sure.
that's being done. You guys do great.
We appreciate that, and we really try to give the citizens the best service that we can. I thought it interesting, Mayor, that you brought up the equipment, because one of the last pie charts, and I promise this is my last one, is fiscal year 2017 PSAP expenditure data. This is data pulled from a state report that I'm required to file with the state of Iowa program manager on an annual basis. It's based on the last completed fiscal year ending 2017, June 30th of 2017. And what you see here is the actual total cost of running the communication center. So we talked about the operating budget, and we had that split and we talk about the county's portion, the city's portion. But what we're actually looking at here is the total cost for fiscal year 2017 that it cost us to run the communications center. You'll see that the biggest pie is borne by the 911 service board, which is the $1 surcharge that you have on your telephones. And that's the fund that goes to pay for the equipment upgrades. So nearly all of our call processing equipment, radio equipment, computer equipment, all of those expenses, for the most part, unless they're strictly administrative in nature, would come from the 911 fund. The requirement there is that it must be equipment that's used for the receipt and disposition of the 911 call per state statute. So, so the actual percentage that covers is the 46%. The other slice that you see here is kind of the orange section, which is kind of 1% of the cost, or an estimated $10,000 that's borne by the county just for housing and communications center. Just the portion of the courthouse, the maintenance expenses of the courthouse. We don't pay any rent to the courthouse for housing us or anything like that. So that is the portion that the county covers out of general fund that's not accounted for in our budget. And that's all figured based off of the square footage, given a weighted to the total amounts that the county pays for their building upkeep. So just an additional set of figures for the council to view, to get, I guess, the whole picture about what it costs us as a county to run the communications center on an annual basis.
So you got on the last page, the yellow, the sheriff, the city of Carroll, and the county general fund. So that's what's reflected in this. So how do you account for the extra $365,000?
So the $365,000 is the 911 service board.
It's not in this part here.
It is here. What do you mean?
Well, because
It's not in your budget printout.
your total budget's $483.
Right, exactly. So
They pay that separately?
There is two separate budgets.
Is that federal government, Gene?
Oh.
It's from
So
the
It's what?
E911 money,
Yeah.
and it's paid, they got a regular board that handles that money, and they pay those expenses directly out of their budget.
Right, so the
For equipment.
E911 board,
Like you call it pass-through grant.
every county has to maintain a 911 service board. The service board membership involves a representative from every city that operates, every municipality entity, including the county, that operates a public safety agency. So anybody that operates a fire department, a police department, they each get one representative to that board. I think there's 14 members approximately, because they just recently added emergency management, having representation on that board from recent legislative change. So the city of Carroll gets a representative. The city of Carroll's representative is Chief Burke, and every county every entity must put somebody up to govern that money. So that board makes the decisions on the budgetary numbers on that. It's separate from the city, although it's accounted for in the county's budget.
I think just so you're clear, the sheet that's here that we got on the top.
Yes.
And if you look on the sheet on the back on the pie chart, it's the sheriff, the city of Carroll, and the county
Right.
general fund. Those are the monies that are reflected in that top
In the
page.
budget, yes.
Yeah.
The yellow and the blue.
Right.
For the county and the police department would be what's reflected in the comm center.
Center's budget, yeah.
And then there's
The other half of your
911
budget from the
The
911.
E911 budget, yeah.
Gotcha. Yep.
It's not representative as a budget document. That's
Correct.
trustees.
Okay.
I'm just curious, how many workers do you have in the comm center that actually operate the equipment?
So we have 6 full-time employees
Okay.
and 1 part-time employee. That includes myself. as one of those
And
employees.
are the employees required to live within a certain distance of the comm center?
They are not.
Or not?
No.
They live in another county?
They could, some of them do. But they're required to be here whenever their shift starts, or anytime we call them into the office. And it's usually not a problem. We have some dedicated employees that sometimes get a hotel room at their own expense to make sure that they're here for their shift. So.
Would you be willing to reevaluate this chart?
Well, you know,
And I was thinking about that, and like I said, I'm only one of the board members.
Right.
I can bring it back to them and see what they say. You know, and you were talking about, you know, that being revisited, you know, and I was just sitting there thinking, that could also be the same consensus as far as the ambulance, where the usage is at. I mean, I don't think that is paying its way totally, because last year was about a $440,000 shortfall. That was picked up by the county. I won't spread out amongst anybody. So I mean.
It's just the Carroll County Ambulance Service.
Yeah.
Is that,
I'm just
Yeah.
using that, you know, just, that we do other things besides.
yeah,
for you.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay?
gotcha.
Anything else?
Thanks.
No. Thank you. I guess that, you know, Vern, it's certainly something to look at. I mean, I think there are other things that we could,
Well, he mentioned they're gonna look at it.
right, and I think, you know, we can get the agreement out, look at it on our own too, and maybe we can go from there and then.
I was more or less looking for an
Yeah.
explanation and
Right,
reasons.
just so people understand.
Yeah.
You know, if anything, if we look at it again, it may come up the same, but at least that way we may have some explanations as to why.
Why and what happened back
You know,
in,
30-year-old contract.
right.
Probably worth looking at and just making sure it's all equitable.
Should we make a motion to do that?
Well,
Dave, you think, or?
is it they that have to look at it?
Well, it's
Well,
agreement between the two of us.
Okay.
Yes, we're a member, so we would have the right to push it.
Okay.
I mean, we can certainly have,
I would think we put that on the record.
yeah, at least
As far
then
as
it's
the
out
motion
there.
that council or staff is instructed
Because I think there are other council
Research
members that would
was-
like to have, you know, some understanding of what transpired.
Yep.
And there may be information that comes out that says we don't do anything or whatever. But at least I think everybody then at the table understands. So, I guess I'll entertain a motion to look at the 28 agreement.
I'd like to know what caused the 28E agreement to be drawn up. Were there
Right.
other comm centers before 87? You know, just kind of to know the history or...
I didn't, Carroll, I
I-
thought the city of Carroll, we had
I
a
know
comm center at
nothing.
one time. Brad, do you remember that? I thought we had our own comm center for our own
We did.
city at one
There was
time.
one in the police department at one point.
Right.
This was many
Okay.
years ago, and Greg may know better, but I don't know if the county had one separate, or if that was just the one that ran the whole county.
Do
If
you-
somebody wanted to check, they could probably check with Jeff Kaler.
Yeah, Kaler set most of this up.
Oh.
Yeah, because that would have
I-
been, he
yeah.
would have
We
been,
can probably find the old agreements. Jeff
The
would be.
agreement.
Yeah, I have
Right.
I have a copy of the agreement. We can get that out to
I
council.
just wondered what
right.
caused the 2080 agreement to
Come
come into
together.
play.
And I don't know
That's
if it's
it,
in the
whatever it
agreement or
was,
not.
yeah.
Like I
I
said,
don't know.
like I think just for information, so people know,
mean-
Well, it hasn't been looked at for
Yeah.
many
Right.
years.
Yeah.
so.
And looking back at 87, that's probably about when 911,
That's what I'm thinking.
Started.
I believe that's about the time. that-
Oh, really?
Maybe that's when they
Yeah.
would have probably
I don't
decided to
know.
put the two together, so you had a common area for fire, police, sheriff.
And
I don't
then
know.
the funding source evolved
Yeah.
from that.
and I would say, you know, it's been interesting to learn some of this, because obviously I'm
Yeah.
new, how this has morphed over time too,
Mhm.
because this wasn't day one, everyone operating out of it. Manning had a 911 communication center until 12 years ago.
They had one out of their
Yeah, that's-
hospital.
It would have been 99, 2000, right in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
is when
They put together a
So 18 years
timeline
ago.
of
I
some
I think if you
sort.
look
Right.
back, you'll probably find the beginning of that, when the revenue source started of the 911 dollar.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
when it probably started, or shortly thereafter.
Right.
Because there was no common revenue source at any time until that point.
Right.
And then it became common, so that's probably about the year 87 for some reason. It's close.
But I guess my
That
point
makes
was,
sense, yeah.
certainly from 87, the nature and makeup of the communication center has changed, with Manning being added, going from phones to pagers for fire department. So I think it is a good time just to
I think that's
look
about
at it.
the time, I'm sorry, Mike, I think that's about the time that they started to show up with all the little blue 5-digit signs out in the county.
Those came in a little bit later.
Yeah, but I think, you had to manufacture them first.
That was a.
Yeah, and I think, but that was, I think, a prerogative to get that
Correct.
started, so that
Correct.
you're not, okay, where's rural route 2? I'm 5 miles east and 2 miles west on 220th Street. Where's that? At least now there's a number with the mapping and stuff. You can go right to the fire or whatever.
You got to remember, a lot of that thought process at that time, a lot of the local cities had, there weren't pagers, there were fire phones, there were conference circuits that were hooked up to make that work. There was different ways of communicating. And when this money source started, that's when it became trying to get together. And I don't know why the philosophy is. It's a very valid question. But how we started that, there may be a very logical reason for all this.
Right.
There may be.
I think he's right, that a lot of those communities used to have fire phones that would ring to so many houses, and then somebody had a button to push the fire. Otherwise, they had no way of communicating. That's the only way they could communicate. So that all.
But there was no 911 per se at that
Right,
time. It was
right.
all a localized number that was given to the community.
Was the shared phone, okay.
According to the State Library of Iowa, it was July 1st of 1986 when 911 was established, so that would fit pretty good with the timeline of 87 coming to the 2080 agreement.
Okay.
So you need a motion for staff to investigate the 2080
2080
agreement
That's what I think, yeah.
between the city and county for
For the
administration of the comm center.
Yeah. Sounds good.
For your motion?
That's my motion.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Haley?
Yes.
Fleischner?
Yes.
Dirk?
Yes.
Seaman?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Bates? Yes. Motion is approved.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. We'll kind of look at it, and then we'll kind of just go from there and see. Thank you. Good night.
Nice, thanks.
Let's see here. Our next item, we'll go to the appointment of the Attorney for Labor and Employment Services, and Mike.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight before you, and we have incomplete information, I realize right now, because I'm looking at the packet and part of it did not get included. But with our pending retirement of our Labor Council, Jim Gillum of Long Gillum, the city did send out an RFP seeking labor and employment services. The city received 4 responses to the RFP. The council, as part of that RFP, did select a subcommittee, 2 council members, Laura, Dave Bruner, Brad, and myself, to review those. We did that on January 12th, and based on the review of those RFP proposals, the committee is recommending that Allers Cooney PC be appointed our labor and employment services attorney. Mike Galloway with Allers Cooney is here. And I guess I'll turn it over to Mike. And I guess the component we are missing is what should have been attached also to this memo would have been a proposal from them. And that was omitted from the council packet.
And it
so-
should be in your email as we speak.
Okay,
There's an engagement letter.
the engagement letter, but the proposal did not go out to council
Okay.
tonight, so they're all flying blind right now.
So you have that.
We have that, yes.
Well, I can give you a little background if that's what you want to do and go from there.
Yeah.
I'm Mike Galloway with Allers and Cooney. I've been there 15, 16 years now. We are probably the largest law firm that serves governmental agencies in the state. Our expertise is in the finance, city, county, any type of school district finance work, as well as labor and employment. Those are our 2 major focuses. As me personally, I represent probably close to half of the counties in the state, 40 to 45. My partners then also add up to another, I do most of the county work. Also do a lot of cities throughout the state. I probably have 20 to 30 city clients, and it's all in labor relations. I specialize in just that, collective bargaining, all the HR functions that go along with that. My background is I started with the state of Iowa out of law school back in '97, a long time ago. I was the general counsel for the Department of Personnel, which was the centralized HR functions for all the state. I was in charge of approximately 20,000 employees in their collective bargaining. I had a staff. I also spent time in Polk County as running all of their labor relations and HR functions. And then I've been with Allers representing clients since then. My client list, like I said, cities, counties, but I also represent some school districts, Des Moines Area Community College, the Iowa Board of Regents, the Judicial Branch, and all over the place. So this is what I do. And we've given a whole bunch of references. I'll be more than happy to supply any more that would be helpful for the council to make any decisions. We pride ourselves on being very responsive. You'll see in the package, I'll be your primary, I'll be the person that you see all of the time when we have meetings like this. But there's work that needs to be done that we can also do at a cheaper hourly rate to make sure that we try to be as cost effective for the cities and for any of our clients that we work with. So I have other folks, other attorneys on staff that I will assign certain work to if it's policy review or things like that. I'll let Mike, as the city manager, tell me when he really needs me here and when he wants me here. Currently, I know you have one contract that will be open, the police contract.
Correct, and we were set to go into negotiations with that, and
I actually was with your business agent, Rick Willett,
Okay.
in Norwalk and Perry over the last couple of weeks, and I said I was coming up to the city, so he was fine with holding off on the timeframes until the city made a decision. So I worked with Rick for a lot of years, so I don't see any issues moving forward on that. So I'd open it up to any questions that you may have of me. I apologize. I've been on the road since about 6 this morning. I started in Hampton, then Clarion, then to here, so it's been a long day for me.
Well, yeah, thanks for coming first. I most of the time, this is my 6th year doing the council. Some of them were been here for quite a while. I've never met the labor attorney ever. We always had him on the phone.
I was kind of thinking that.
So, would you come out and visit? I mean, certainly we can do it on the phone too. I know we've done that in the past. But
Typically, I do a lot more face-to-face.
face, okay.
I like to do it that way. I mean, there
Okay.
may be certain things.
Not that I'm complaining that that's what we
Right.
had, but I just never knew. I couldn't put a face to who I was talking
You'll
with.
probably see me a lot more, and as much as you want to see me on certain
Okay.
issues. Oftentimes what we do, so for instance, let's say that you engage us. One of the things that I would suggest that the council and the mayor do is, once we get the union's initial proposal for the police department, we get it from the Teamsters, we come in and have a discussion about the process. There's been a lot of changes in Chapter 20, I'm sure you've heard of that, which is the collective bargaining statute. We could have a discussion about what that means for this group, police, as well as your mixed group, which is basically all of the other employees within the city, and set some parameters and some discussion about reasonable expectations that you can hope for out of negotiations. So typically I come up for a work session and spend a half an hour and let you ask questions so that you become knowledgeable in the process too, or as knowledgeable as you want to be.
And I think, after having that last go-around with the legislature and changing all that, I think a lot of that, just sitting here talking with Mike with some of the initial stuff with the police department, the dynamics of what we now can discuss have changed. So it's not going to be the same as it was 3 years ago when we initially did this, so.
That's absolutely correct, and it's really dramatically going to change for your public works group and your mixed
Right.
unit, which is up June 30th and 19th, so or whoever's negotiating will be doing that next fall.
Certain parameters that we did with the police department, we could carry over to public works, but that's not going to be
That's not going to be the
case
case
anymore. Right, so, yeah, I mean, maybe just having someone come out and help.
I think that
get
that
us
would
through
be,
that.
so what I would really tell you to do is, we can go into an exempt session under 20.17 paragraph 3 to talk about negotiation strategy. So once we set up a date with the Teamsters to receive their initial, and to save expense, typically what Rick Willett and I do, Rick will send me a complimentary advance copy of the initial proposal. I'll send it up to Mike, and I will then schedule a time to come up here and visit with everybody, and we'll go through that, and then we'll talk about all of the changes in the law and exempt session and develop our negotiation strategy, not only for this contract, but for your next one that you'll have open. So we'll have an idea of what things we'll be looking at in the future. then what we'll do is to be effective, we'll set one time as a public meeting and we'll do a dual exchange, and then we'll exchange both the initial proposals at the same time. We'll go right into negotiations, and typically, my style is if you can't get an agreement within 1 or 2 meetings, then we need to move the process on into mediation. This isn't going to be a lengthy process. We have long-term contracts. I'm going to advise you of exactly what you can expect and what you need to do as a city to get a voluntary agreement. I think last year I might have had 1 contract go to arbitration out of 50 that I did. So I think it's very advantageous for the employers to get voluntary agreements. It's good for employee morale, and I think multiple year contracts are a good thing. That way you don't have to see me all the time, and it becomes labor peace, and people know what to expect.
Right. I think we just like a smooth transition from contract to contract. There's going to be bumps, but
No, it'll be smooth.
smooth is what I...
You said multi-year contracts. I'm just curious, before this changed, was there a lot of cities doing multi-year contracts?
Yeah, almost all the cities and counties do multi-year contracts, very few single-year contracts. School districts, because of the funding, oftentimes did single-year contracts. There was a lot of extensions signed before the law changed.
That's what my question.
Because people didn't know. They didn't know what to expect, employees didn't know what to expect, so they wanted some consistency. And quite honestly, as we've seen right now, there's a lot of litigation coming out after the law, and it's really not great if you're one of the employers getting sued, and there's a lot of legal fees this time. So what we've done is done a 2-year extension, let the dust settle a little bit, and now people are coming back to the table this year, and we're finding out exactly what we can do and what we can't do. And I think overall, everybody's been happy, because there was consistency and continuity.
Have you had a chance to look at any of our stuff?
I have looked at your contracts.
Okay, so you kind of...
That's why I know the dates. I know
Okay.
your employee contributions are 20% on the insurance. I've looked at the wage rates in the police. I've looked at your wage rates in the public works contract. I've started to familiarize myself. I don't know if there's big issues with language issues until we start talking.
Delve into the real...
They're probably long-term contracts, and typically people are able to live with those in terms.
I think the biggest thing will be when we go into our mixed group, really discussing, do we want status quo, do we want game changer, and I think that'll be the real discussion point with council.
And remember, one of the key things with that contract is right now there's a lot of things that formerly we had to negotiate about are now illegal subjects that have to come out of the contract. And so one of the things that we've been doing a lot of right now is removing things. And the employee groups are understanding. I mean, Teamsters overall have been very good. They understand. They know what the law changes. They might not like it. There might be a lot of people that don't like it, but it is the law and we need to follow.
Any other questions for Mike? I don't mean to put you on the spot, Dave. You felt comfortable with everything what you had seen, or?
Yeah, the group that met and reviewed the proposals were very, very comfortable. We're somewhat familiar with your firm, kind of know your culture, and I think you may know ours a little bit.
Yep.
So, yeah, qualification and reputation is very good, unmatched, so we're real comfortable with the recommendation.
So my suggestion would be, I think it's fair to get the proposal out, which was excluded. We have a meeting scheduled actually for Thursday, so we're in our budget workshop. I guess if there's any questions now, we'll get the proposal out tomorrow morning, and then I would ask that we act on it Thursday.
So I'll need a motion to probably table this till Thursday.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Fleshner?
Yes.
Dirks?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Seaman?
Yes.
Cox?
Yes.
Base?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
And I apologize.
Oh,
for
no
the
worries.
bad issue.
Thank you, everybody. It's nice to meet everybody, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you very much for
Take care.
coming out, Mike.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll get it done. Thanks.
Could be weird not talking to the speaker box.
Not that that was a problem, I just, it always seemed kind of odd. Susan's not here yet.
Budget.
Should we start with Laura? You want to do the
Start
budget
with-
or Mike?
Start with me, please.
All right, we'll start with you, Mike, sorry. Thank you.
First, I'd like to say, just on behalf of the city's department head, staff. I am very pleased to present the budget that you have before you tonight. One of the things I'd highlight is we did make a change this year to the budget book, and that is we added some department summaries. You'll see that in a tab E in the budget book. One of the things we really want to strive to do is always make the budget book more user-friendly, and we hope that this does this. All the information you've seen in previous years is in the budget book. We just put summaries and highlighted them back to the section of the budget where you can find more information. So we think that really brings all the departments together. Like police is a good example where, they have the police department budget, then they have the comm center, they have the crime services. So it really does highlight the different areas of the budget book. You can find that information. So as submitted.
On that note too, I want to just say thank you for the extra work on that. That does make things very.
And you got to thank the department heads again. They're the ones that did the hard work on this.
It was a lot easier to follow when I opened that thing up and start going through it than, you could have a summary right away instead of trying to go through. It took a lot less time.
And certainly, as we go forward, we're always looking for suggestions to making the budget process and the budget information more meaningful to people. So as submitted, the proposed fiscal year 2019 budget proposes expenditures across all funds of $33,083,306. This is up substantially by $8,834,647 over the original approved FY 2018 budget as comparison. This increase mainly is driven by a number of capital improvement projects, mainly the City Hall and library renovations, along with the wastewater treatment plant renovations that are proposed. In comparison, compared to FY 2018, there was $5.4 million in expenditures for capital improvement projects. For FY 2019, there's $11,817,779 in capital improvement projects proposed across all of our capital improvement areas. This is an increase of $6.3 million. In the general fund, revenues for FY 2019 are proposed at $7,616,756, with expenditures proposed at $8,401,765. And while the general fund does show a deficit of $785,000, the city is projected to end fiscal year 2019 with a general fund balance of $1.9 million, or 25.5% of our expenditures, which compared to 2018 was 25.8%. So this does meet our targeted goal to end with a cash balance greater than 25% of budgeted revenues.
I think that's kind of where we've periodically been.
Yep, that's historically where we target.
When we're looking at these figures, are you adjusting for expected unpaid property taxes? Or is it just such a small amount that?
It's such a small amount. Typically, we have to put that information together for a different filing I have to do, and we're usually collecting at least 99, if not 100% of what we
I looked at one and didn't see it, so I wonder.
Good question. So property taxes overall, we're seeing our overall taxable property tax base increase in the city of Carroll by 6.75%. Largely that is due to the resulting equalization order, which increased commercial by 7% residential by 7%, commercial by 9%. So for fiscal year 2019, the city of Carroll overall proposed levy is 11.28383 per $1,000 of taxable value. This is down 31.417 cents when compared to the FY 2018 levy rate. And again, this is attributed to the increase in the property value. So when you look at the property tax revenues the city will be collecting, we will be up 3% compared to the FY 2018 budget property tax revenues that we received. Debt service levy, an area that we typically talk about, we'll be talking about with Suzanne later. The City Council has targeted to have a debt service levy at 1.28 cents per thousand in value. And for FY 2018, we were at 1.28014 cents. the proposed debt service levy for FY 2019 in this budget is .87898 cents, which is down from that targeted area. Now, we are increasing other levies where we can do that to really stabilize an overall levy rate. And then the excess dollars that we will be collecting, I wouldn't say excess dollars, but those additional dollars we will be setting aside for the street maintenance garage. This is really a one-time change we're anticipating, and in part based on the discussion we'll have Suzanne later. We're planning to see that debt service levy return to the $1.28 level in fiscal year 2020 and beyond.
Does that debt service levy include the library that passed? The .87?
Correct. So we're anticipating there will be a pre-levy resolution for both the library city hall project and for the FY 2019 capital improvement projects for parks. And so certainly if the library city hall project would not go forward, there are other projects in that initial debt issuance that those dollars would go towards. Not debt issuance, pre-levy resolution, those dollars would go towards. So certainly it's not causing a stockpile of dollars if the library city hall project would not go forward for some reason.
Well, it's just that the campaign said that, you're not going to raise the debt service levy, and this proves it, correct?
That would be correct.
Can I back up just a tick on you,
Yeah.
Mike, or should I let you get through this initial?
No, you go ahead and you can ask questions.
Just curious, when we talk about 3% increase year over year, what do we expect for inflation year over year?
Well, it depends on what index you use, because there's a lot of different index. I would say CPUI Midwest would be one that would generally apply to us, but one of the issues even with that is you have a construction price index, which we build our roads and other infrastructure on, is increasing way more than the CPUI. So, I mean, it's a hard number to come by, but, CPUI would say probably between 1.8, 2.2%. But, then your construction index is running 5 to 8%.
So somewhere in the middle of there is reality.
I would say yes.
Thank you.
Council priorities, this proposed budget does include 2 of the 3 initiatives set by council at your December 17th goal-setting session. Specifically, we are proposing $175,000 for geo-bonding for the pickleball courts at Northwest Park, and $25,000 is proposed in general fund to complete a traffic study of the signals on Highway 30. Staff does continue to explore ways to develop more affordable lots in Carroll as one of the initiatives. However, we were not at a point to include any expenditures in the FY 2019 budget. Employment costs, which is a big driver for the city budget overall. Salary adjustments overall in the budget include the negotiated 2.5% for Public Works Union and a 2.25% for both police, union, patrol officers, and non-union positions. Obviously, negotiations are still underway with the police union, so salary adjustments for FY 2019 are very much subject to change. The city does operate a partially self-funded health insurance, as you know, for our full-time employees, which really does continue to be doing very well. The plan is comprised of a fully insured high-deductible plan that we purchase off the shelf from Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. The city then self-funds a health reimbursement arrangement that buys down our health insurance premium cost, or our health insurance deductibles and maximum out-of-pockets. So this budget that you see before you kind of gets complicated, but it plans for a 20% increase in our premiums to Wellmark. We are planning for a 0% increase in our COBRA rates just because of what we see. And our COBRA rates is what the employee in the city pays for health insurance. Additionally, as we were starting up our original self-funding component, we developed a internal service fund for our self-funding. And the city's been placing 20% of our COBRA rate into this fund, which is now at a position that we believe is sufficiently funded and has sufficient reserves. So at this point, In the 2019 budget, we are proposing to end that practice, which, with all that said, will actually result in a savings in what the city pays in our health insurance premium by $91,000 over our FY 2018 expenditures. Now, for our employees, COBRA rate's not changing. They'll continue to pay the 20%, so they'll see little change in their premiums overall, even as we end this practice. With all this said, we do anticipate that our internal service fund will see an increase from $625,000 at the end of FY 2017 to $740,000 at the end of 2019. So we're seeing us be in a very positive position, and we're being very conservative on how we budget. For example, our health reimbursement accounts, we budget for about $100,000 based on our discussions internally, and I'm blanking on her name now.
Debbie Dean.
Yeah.
Debbie Dean, based on discussions with Debbie Dean. But in reality, our expenditures have been around $50,000. So we are very conservative in this area.
So I'm not clear, that you're saying that we're just going to not fund it for 1 year? Or
No, I think
you
going
think, you think
forward,
indefinitely there's enough in there?
yeah, where our reserve levels, as long as our rates keep the same, I mean, and we don't see a catastrophic issue, going forward, the city will not, we've been putting in essentially 100% of the cost,
Right.
and employees have been putting 20% of the cost. We're saying we're going to end the practice of putting that additional 20% in, and the city will only be putting in the 80% because we've got the reserve to a level that we're comfortable with.
That changes that you don't want to ignore it completely at the end of every year. You know, that should be reevaluated though, if it needs to.
We
come
certainly,
back in.
and we
Yeah.
evaluate it very
Okay.
closely. So I just want to end by saying the city of Carroll and myself are very fortunate to have a very good team of employees that put together this budget. So I do want to thank Laura in particular, because she works very hard on this budget, but also all the department heads, Brad, Jack, Greg, Randy, Rachel, sorry, I'm blanking there. But really, thank you for the work that you guys put in the budget. Thank you to your staff, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council has on this at this point.
I think they're going to end that backfill next year, didn't that come out in the news today? I think we're getting it this year, isn't it?
It's still in fiscal 18
Yeah.
budget. We've received half of it, and as far as I know, it's still planned to get the second half, because they
Right.
allocate it in the same months that everybody pays the bulk of their property. You know, we all pay our taxes, or most of us pay our taxes in September and in March, and that's when the state makes their allocation. So we got the September allocation.
Right.
We're
March
anticipating
one.
to get the March.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly what I would say is, I have not heard that. Legislative forum, they talked about that there's 2 protected areas with Governor Reynolds, education and the backfill. So I thought that was very positive. But certainly the legislature, they're going to have their discussions. The Senate defunding bill did not touch the backfill. So
Yeah, I think we're going to get it. It's the following year that I think is up in limbo.
I think that's going to be an ongoing discussion
understood.
that's always going to be there. But right now, the governor has really drawn a line in the sand, saying, you know, this has been a commitment that we'd always fund this, but that certainly with the budget woes that the state's having, it's always something that is up for defunding, deappropriation.
Any more questions from my trying to waste time for Susan? Should we move to Laura then?
Yes.
Go ahead. All right, Laura, I'll get you started, and if I see her come in,
By all
I'll
means,
wait
yes.
till you.
Yep, you can cut me off at any point, yes. At any point, if anybody has any questions, please stop us and let's talk about it. My portion right here is going to plan on just going over some of the summary stuff that's been prepared. And as time allows, then we'll move into some more detailed discussion of each department. But if you could turn the page on page 1, labeled number 1, and number 2 are projected balances in each of the funds. If you recall, when it comes to fund accounting, each fund, I would say it acts like its own checking account. You need to have money that is being generated to come into that fund to pay for expenditures that are going out. Now, each of the funds has a specific purpose. For instance, our general fund is our day-to-day operations of the city. You think about the running of the rec center, the mowing of the parks, the police department, the fire department, day-to-day things that the city does. Then we get into the rest of the funds that have a more specialized purpose for them. I won't, as we go through some of our discussions, we'll touch more on them, but I will just highlight maybe a couple of them where we're anticipating maybe some negative balances and how we plan to correct those at the end of fiscal 19. So as you can see, everything right now is projected to be in a positive position, except with the library city hall remodeling. And we'll get into maybe some more deeper discussions, but just on a high level here, the way this was put together was the revenue that is being projected is the latest information we had from the foundation on their fundraising efforts. As we know, they're continuing to fundraise, but we did not put those revenues in here at this point. But we are anticipating for the project to go forward, and so the expenditure side is on here. So that's why you see a negative balance at this point. As more information comes from the foundation, that I'm sure will be shared with council. Does anybody have any specific questions about any of the funds, maybe just in general what they do? We can get into some more discussions about those too as time goes on.
Well, on page 3, the gas and electric, explain what that is. Taxable value, property plots.
I believe the gas and electric.
Page 3.
Yep, that's gonna be under tab B. Now we're getting into, you're talking about the taxable, or the
I might
valuation.
have jumped ahead on you here, but,
That's fine.
Okay.
I was ready to move there too.
all right.
But before we get to that, let's maybe look at page 4. Let's just take a step back and talk a little bit about how we get from the assessed value, or what assessed value means, to taxable valuation. So assessed valuation is supposed to be close to value on property as if you were in an arm's length transaction buying and selling property, okay? Well, in some cases, we get what's called a state equalization order. They come out every other year. And the state, during that time period in between each state equalization order, is evaluating any type of sales transactions that are occurring in your county. And if the sales transactions are too far different than what your assessed values are, the state can come in and say, hey, we're going to automatically change it. It could be up or down. So not just because we're going up this year or what we've gone up in the past, there could be times where it would go down.
And I just want to interject one thing, because I think it's important too. That doesn't mean the county assessor on a year-to-year basis can't be changing the assessed value. State equalization order is really, for whatever reason, values haven't kept up to what the state's seeing sales occur at. And so they're ordering on a county-wide basis values to increase by that percentage. So you could see value increases. You know, in reality, a 9% commercial, if the county would have come in and done a 4.5% 2 years ago, 4.5% last year, you probably would have seen a 0% state equalization order. And so it's really kind of catching it up to what they're seeing, a trend in the sales value.
So the seller's market really affects it.
It's what's really happening. I mean, they're looking at the data, I mean, they're looking at every one of their sales, they're making a decision, is the sale a true arm's length transaction, or is there something underlying like a foreclosure that they would actually kick that sale out? Because if you see a foreclosure, they won't use that in value data, in assessed values.
Okay. So as you can see, the residential property, we actually saw an assessed value increase of 8.6%, which the state equalization order was 7%. So we had some other growth in there on top of the state equalization order. As well as the commercial property went up almost 9.9%. So and the state equalization order was 9%. So we saw some growth or some change in valuation. So it could have been growth, it could have been revaluation from the county as well. But overall, we are seeing an increase in our assessed value, including TIF, of 8.4%. So that becomes our basis of getting to the next step of your taxable valuation, which then drives the amount of revenue you can generate. So first we have to come up with our assessed values. We apply rollbacks because the state law requires us to. So for instance, you take your assessed value on the residential property and you multiply it by, this year it is 55.6209%, and that is the amount of the taxable valuation that we can say we can apply a levy to generate taxes. So it's not the 100% assessed value, it's this rolled back value. But getting to your gas and electric question, Jerry, you asked what is that? When it comes to the gas and electric, the Mid-American and the Alliant Energy in our community, their pipelines, I think their infrastructure, thank you. Their infrastructure in the community is not valued the same way as your home is valued. And so I can't speak to how they come up with their values.
Well, it's
for
probably
sure.
based on their own profitability, I guess. How much, that would be my guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
that I couldn't tell you for sure how they do that.
I can still tell you in Minnesota that's true.
We don't
But
have
I
that.
don't know what it is in Iowa.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that's that portion, and then there's, you can see another utility section without the gas and electric, so they keep them separate. Let's see. Overall, our taxable valuation grew, as Mike said, 6.75%. So, in terms of, I would say, what economic impact or what economic development's doing in the community, it's shown
Some growth.
some growth. We're doing some good things. Well, I guess you'd probably start with your assessed value to show that. Because the state equalization order did come in and say you have to increase your values regardless. So, things are moving. We're doing things in the community as a whole. So any questions about the valuation portion of this? This really becomes our foundation, our basis of how we can derive and get to the amount of money we generate from the tax levy. Then some of these charts on the next pages are things that you can see. We've put these together for a number of years so you can see some trends, and we give a 10-year history. So the residential rollback just shows you where the residential rollback has gone. We've grown over the last 10 years from a 45.6% to 55.6% over that 10-year period. Or the rollback has changed, I shouldn't say it's grown, it's changed. And it's tied to agricultural production, if I recall this correctly. It's something to do with the ag land. That your property values can't grow any more than a certain percentage.
It's 3%.
It's 3% each year. And then the state will come in and say, okay, your values are, they just can't, your taxable values can't grow that much. So, I think the projections are for the rollback to stay fairly flat, if not dip slightly. Suzanne can talk a little bit more about this when she gets here, because she's got a little bit more insight into some of that stuff. But I know the future of it is not for the rollback to climb up into the 80%, but to be probably more stable in the 50%. On page 6, we take a look at that. Page 5 was just the residential property portion. Page 6, we're looking at all our taxable valuation. So all those classes combined, residential, commercial, utilities, railroad, everything combined. And it shows you a 10-year trend of where we've gone. As you can see, we had quite a bit of a jump from fiscal 14 to fiscal 15. We had another equalization order there that, if my memory serves me correctly, commercial went up 32% and residential went up 10%. And then we kind of stayed fairly flat the next few years, and then we saw another state equalization order from 18 to 19. I would say those are probably the biggest drivers in those two big jumps, as opposed to lots of development going on. I would say those are, yes, we've had some things going on, but those big jumps like that is going to be driven by those state equalization orders. Page 7 is a new page that we've decided to put in here this year to give you a little bit of more of a narrative and background about the different types of property taxes that we collect and what they're used for. The general fund, we talk about it as the 810, and then we'll put the narrative to actual numbers in the next 2 pages. So the general fund, or you hear us talk about the 810 levy. That is the money that we generate to run the city, basically our general fund, our day-to-day operations. So if that's not enough for you to operate your city, there is another one called the emergency levy that you can levy up to an additional 27 cents. The last number of 4 or 5 years, we have not used that levy, though a number of cities do use that levy. Some historic, or some facts here that Mike found, 795 of Iowa's 947 cities are currently at the maximum $8.10. So the bulk of them are. The emergency levy, out of the cities, 334 cities are at that 27-cent limit. We were one of them a few years ago, but when we had a huge increase in our valuation, we felt it was not needed anymore, and so it was taken off. And, oh yeah, we have not levied for it since fiscal year 2015, and it's not being proposed in this budget either. The employee benefit levy, that's the levy that we use to levy for our employee benefits, not salaries, but the other mandated employee benefits that we have to pay, FICA, IPERS, the municipal police and fire retirement system, and health insurance are the main things there. It can be levied for employee benefits that are paid out of your general fund and your road use tax fund, but not for any expenses that you're paying for out of your enterprise funds, water, sewer. Your user fees need to cover those expenses.
So that you can't use them to pay for the benefits of the water employees?
No.
So that's why we and other cities max out on the general fund, because the money is more discretionary. It's not limited where you can spend it. Because, I mean, you know, we max that, but we don't the others. We could change that. It's no advantage to, I understand that, but that is.
Well, okay, so that one has a max. The employee benefit doesn't have a max per se, but it does. It does and it doesn't. It's not a set dollar amount, but you can only levy for the amount of the expenses that you believe you're gonna have.
I think to answer your question, yes. I mean,
That's-
we'd rather
We'd rather
max
have
the
money that we can
810,
move
we have more
wherever we want.
flexibility.
Okay.
The employee benefits where it is, I mean, if we don't have an employee benefit cost and we over levy, those dollars are gonna sit there in the next year. That's the first dollars
It's in
out.
place, right?
Okay. Then the tort liability, same concept as the employee liability or the employee benefit levy, in the fact that you need to show that you have those expenses related to liability insurance. This is our worker comp, our property insurance, our auto insurance, our general liability for the city. So we need to have those expenses in order to levy for the revenue.
So you're going off last year's expenses to get that?
Yes, yep. And then I keep a running total, so if for some reason the expenses, well, I actually use this year's projected number to figure out what the levy should be, and then if we're over, under, we adjust the next year. And then the debt service levy is the amount that we levy to pay annual principal and interest on debt that we have outstanding. We'll have a lot deeper discussion when Suzanne gets here about the different projects and such that are being proposed. This is another one that it's not limited in a 10 amount like the general fund is, but you can only levy for the amount necessary. So if you don't have the debt, you can't levy for it. Okay, any questions in general about the types of levies that we use? There are many more levies that could be used if you had those type of expenditures and if you wanted to levy for those.
A lot of them
expenses.
take a voter referendum.
Some of them do, yes. Yep. And some of the levies that council could just put on, we don't have the expenditures to do it. We don't have that type of project, so to speak, so we can't have it. All right, on page 8, we're looking at a summary of how we come to what we're proposing for our city tax rate. As Mike talked about, it is a drop of roughly 31 cents, a little over 31 cents from last year, being proposed at $11.28, just over $11.28, comprised of our 810, our day-to-day general fund levy, 87, almost 88 cents for the debt service, $1.95 for the employee benefits, which pretty much maxes out what we anticipate for our employee benefit expense for fiscal 19, as well as about 35 cents for our property and liability insurance. As Mike talked about, the reason the debt service levy, there's a decrease from $1.28 down to the 87 cents, is we're trying to find a way to help fund the street maintenance garage. And so we're levying some other levies that we can generate some cash, that we can free up some money in the 810 so that we can use that to help pay for the street maintenance garage. Any questions about the levy that's being proposed?
So even though, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
even you know, I always hear these discussions about valuation and the idea that citizens have to tell their council, we gotta drop our debt service levy. Well, so we've dropped it down, but it's probably still gonna be a net wash at the end of the day because the taxable value of your property has gone up.
We have some pages in here that
So-
shows the impact on a residential home and
Commercial home.
commercial building.
So a lot of it is based on not necessarily what we levy per
Right.
se, it's based on the value of what you own,
Exactly.
so.
Yep, there's two components that are more, the two basic components of getting to the amount of taxes you pay, value of your home, the levy that's applied to it.
Right.
We don't have, I would say, direct impact on the value of home. Indirectly, it could be an argument that we have impact on that. But the other one direct impact you have is the levy and what you set that levy amount at.
Okay.
So with the water main break, if it comes down that we're liable for the whole thing, that would affect the library, the insurance levy, potentially.
Potentially. It depends on what it does to our rates, because it's how the levy amount that's figured in here, it's based upon our premiums that we pay. So if our premiums go up due to cause 1, cause 2, cause 3, then yes, we could, if we wanted to, use that levy. Or we could decide we want to use the 810 levy to cover that increase. I would say historically, though, we've been levying pretty much the full amount that we believe we need to cover for any expense that relates to the insurance.
And on that note, talking with Terry Axman, even if the city is liable for it, the way ICAP does their ratings, we would not see an increase because of the way they do the pooling of it. So it should not have an impact on our rates.
So page 8, we show the actual levy amount, because that's what gets certified to the state. It's a requirement that we have to have a levy rate. But then in page 9, we convert that into showing the actual revenues, actual dollars, that converts to when you apply the levy to the taxable valuation. So we're anticipating a little over $4.1 million for what we call the general fund, or the 810 levy. Go straight to the general fund, once again, for the day-to-day operations of the city. Debt service, when we get talking with Suzanne, you'll hear more about the proposal for the amount of debt that we're proposing to have outstanding or to levy for in fiscal 19. Employee benefits, we're levying roughly $996,000 for expenses related to employee benefits for employees that are paid out of the general fund and the road use tax fund. And our tort liability, roughly $180,000. So overall, we're asking or proposing here for a 3% increase of the tax revenue collected from fiscal year 18 to fiscal year 19. So well, let's finish this up real quick.
Yeah, I'd say,
She just walked in.
I'm gonna give her a little bit of a breather there.
So any questions about the actual revenue and the increase of the actual revenue dollars year over year?
The thing, I guess, since I've been on, we've been trying to kind of keep that taxable value rate fairly steady.
The levy?
Instead of swinging it so high, and that seems to me, well, we have this sudden drop off, and I think then the following year, when some of this other stuff starts coming on, now we're gonna pop back up again, and I think that's, I think we've had that, shared that concern, so kind of gives people a little bit of a break, but it's still gonna end up coming back up again,
We'll definitely take a look
It's-
at that and make sure we don't feel like it's going up and down.
Yeah.
And
One of the things Laura and I spent some time really looking at the budget, to your point, kind of projecting out what are our operational costs, putting an increase on those operational costs, keeping in mind that one of the things that's gonna happen is our debt service levy, if it goes up to that $1.28 level next year, the employee benefits we're anticipating will go down because we'll use the 810 to fund those. We're on a path that we believe we'll see a pretty steady, I'm not saying it's gonna go down or it's gonna go up, but it's gonna be steady and there'll be ups and downs in it. But one of the things we really wanted to make sure over the next couple of years was we weren't gonna see a spike, that this was a one-year anomaly and something weird
all of a
was
sudden
gonna
it's
happen.
1277 again.
Because, again, people want that consistency.
That's what I hear from
in
the public. They want the consistency. They want to know when they're doing their budgets that we're kind of, taking them into account. We're trying to keep that level steady.
Yes.
So,
we're trying, and so that kind of leads into, we do take a look at page 10 and 11 leads into what impact this has.
yeah.
Because we have the direct impact, or the direct influence over the levy, but we don't have the direct influence over the valuation.
Right.
So when we all see a 7% increase in our values of our home, is that going to equate to a 7% increase in the actual amount of taxes you pay? It may or may not, depends on what you do to your levy. So I don't know if you want to go into page 10, or if Suzanne's ready to go, if you want to talk debt service.
Are you ready, Suzanne, or do you want to, why don't we go ahead, we'll get you going, and then maybe that'll tie into the rest of this too.
Well, I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
Do you think I think we could finish Laura's conversation in 20 minutes.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because we have food coming at 7, and I think you're going to take longer than 20 minutes, is my guess.
Then, okay.
So,
Okay, well then we'll keep going,
Then let's get,
Okay, so
That's
then,
better.
let's take a look at what this impact does on pages 10 and 11 to a residential property owner and a commercial property owner. So, looking from, on page 10 is our residential. Our middle column is the fiscal 18 information. If you had a home valued at $150,000 this current fiscal year, well, next year, it's going up 7% because of the state equalization order to $160,500. We apply the respective rollbacks that's been determined by the state for each fiscal year to count to a subtotal, apply a homestead credit. We're assuming most people who own their home applied for a homestead credit to get to your taxable valuation. So from fiscal 18 to fiscal 19, that same home, if nothing else was done other than the state equalization order, taxable valuation went from $80,559 to $84,422. The way the formula works, we always divide that by 1,000 to times it by the levy rate. Currently, in fiscal 18, you paid $11 and almost $11.60, $11.598 for this year's taxes, which came to a total city tax bill. Now, I know everybody pays other taxes, county, school, state, a bunch of other things, but the city portion of your tax bill for this home in fiscal 18 was $934.32. Applying the proposed levy that you see in this book to their taxable valuation, the proposed levy of $11.28 gets you a city tax bill of $952.60, which is $18.28 more, just under 2% increase. So even though you saw a 7% increase in your valuation because of the state equalization order, the rollback did go down slightly. Yes, I understand that, though the levy went down quite a bit as well, that you're seeing roughly just under 2% increase in your tax bill from the city portion only.
Even though our levy rate was down 31 cents. you're still paying $18 more.
Yes,
Again, I go back, it's valuation.
it's valuation.
It's
Yes.
not because of what we,
Yes.
what our debt level is.
Yep, we tried to factor that in as we were trying to determine where we thought a good place for the levy should be.
Well, valuation and perhaps inflation, there's always costs that we have to cover that are going to continue to increase, just like anyone's personal budget, so.
So $18.28 over a 12-month period, a little over $1 a month.
Yeah.
For your city portion, granted, we don't have
Right,
any
right,
control
we don't
over
have
the
any
other
control over
ones.
it. And we're just strictly city, we're
Yes.
talking about here.
And I have some pretty good visits with constituents about how that city portion applies to your tax bill that you get, and we all look at that, that's what we base off of, and unfortunately, there's just no really good way to discern one from the other by looking at your tax bill. I'd say if you have questions, please contact me or Mike, and I throw you under the bus at City Hall.
Yep.
They work for you, so stop down at City Hall if you need help understanding where your city portion of your taxes come from. It's very, very tough to try to reconcile between the two.
So on page 10, going back to this, we ran through a few different scenarios of a home value at $150,000, $120,000, $90,000, and $60,000.
Again, I think this chart, one of the things that really we worked on was increasing that value. And so really showing, okay, you're having an increased home value, we're trying to account for that too. So I think this is a really good informational sheet for the public to really get out there, to say, it's not just we're lowering your levy, but no, we're showing a 2%, you're anticipating a 6% increase in your home value. And with the lower levy rate, yes, your taxes are going to go up, but it's certainly not by the same amount that your home values are going up.
Is there a reason why you only make $150,000 your highest?
I know, I thought of that too after these budget books went out, and I'm like, I'm thinking home values probably have gone up.
Yeah, I mean, you could drop that 60 pretty easily.
Probably, yeah. We'll revamp this probably next year and take a look at.
Do a
what-
250 or something.
Yeah, yeah. Page 11, same type of information, but we apply it to commercial property instead of residential property. Once again, we did factor in the 9% state equalization order from fiscal 18 to fiscal 19 values, and that's noted throughout. So for instance, property that was valued at $5 million, assessed at $5 million in fiscal 18, applied the 9% state equalization order for fiscal 19, comes to $5,450,000. The rollback is constant at 90% for commercial property. We get down to our taxable valuation divided by 1,000, apply the levies in the two separate years. The increase from fiscal 18 to fiscal 19 in actual dollars is $3,156, which is a 6% increase, where they had a 9% increase of a state equalization order. But their rollback did not change from one year to the next either, where in the residential example, it did change.
So that makes the 6% commercial, 2% homeowners equals 3% overall.
When you apply all the taxable valuations and throw them in a pot, yes. Any other questions on the tax impact for residential or commercial property owners? The next pie chart breaks down if that home assessed at $150,000, we apply the rollback and all that good stuff to it, and the levies. This breaks it down and says the property tax bill, the check, that's how you pay, check or credit card that you pay at the county treasurer's office, how it breaks down and who gets what part of the pie. So you can see the city gets 43%, the biggest chunk of the pie. The school gets 38.5%. The county gets a little over 15%, and then a couple other small amounts. Now, this is based upon the information for this fiscal year 18. Levies that were applied in fiscal year 18. As we know, levies change from year to year, so those amounts of the pie will change a little bit. Not a huge amount. I would say fairly consistently, the city's been receiving around 40% of your property tax bill.
This is specifically where I've seen some confusion for the public, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the breakdown that's shown on your tax bill. Is this percentage going to the individual entities,
Yes, I
if you will?
think you're correct.
Yeah, that's what I saw. I had a constituent came in and we researched it pretty in depth, and they'll see this breakdown. So if you look at your tax bill and you see 43.11%, that doesn't rhyme with what we're telling you for a levy rate here. It is simply the percentage of your tax bill that is going to the city. Did I say that right, Laura?
Yep.
All right. Once
Which,
again,
which does not include the lost or the motel.
No, those
Right.
are separate.
Okay.
Those are separate. They're collected separately or differently than your property taxes. Yep.
and collected from people outside of the community as
Yes.
well.
Yes, inside and outside.
Yep. So once again, talk to us if you have questions, come see us. We're happy to show you this. This is your budget. These are your dollars, and if you want to know where they're coming from, Laura, Mike, the rest of the staff's done a great job laying it out. We'd love to go over it with you.
One
Right,
thing I
Counsel.
would highlight though too, and it's not a big swing, but I think this is a bigger swing we've seen in recent years, is with the school district in particular.
Yeah.
Last year, they represented 35.3%, where this year they're at 38.53%. And, they were 713, now they're 835. So, I mean, that did cause probably a larger shift than we've seen in previous years, which helped our percentage go down.
All relative.
It is. Okay, any questions about your property tax bill allocation and where the money's going to which taxing authority? If not, page 13. This is a fairly new one. This is the second year we provided this type of information. Thought it was good to show, if you took all the revenue that the city collects citywide, that would include not only the general fund, but our local option sales tax, hotel, motel, what we call our users fees for your water and sewer, stormwater, all those funds, and laid it out. And basically, this is kind of the way we have to report this information on our what's the word I'm looking for? Excuse me. Our budget forms that we file with the state. This is our breakdown. We're getting roughly 26% of our revenue from property taxes. Our next biggest chunk is 25% for charges for services. A large portion of this is our water fees, sewer fees, stormwater, also including rec center memberships and daily admission fees that we're collecting, golf fees, the leisure service programs that the rec center runs for all the different sports activities. Those are all included in this portion as well. Then our next bigger portion would have to be our debt proceeds. That's going to vary from year to year, depending on what type of debt may or may not be issued each year. So that one could swing and then change our pie makeup a little bit. So this year, in the fiscal 19 proposed budget, because that's what this is based upon, the information you have in this budget book, debt proceeds of a little over 4.4 million or 20% of our pie. Then some smaller amounts, the other city taxes at 8%, which is 1.8 million, that would be largely the local option sales tax and the hotel motel tax. Intergovernmental will swing. Right now it's shown at 9% and a little over 2 million. That's going to swing depending on what type of grants we anticipate that we may or may not get. So that's going to vary from year to year depending on what's going on, if there's big projects or not. Any other questions about the types of revenue that we're bringing in? Now, those types of revenue will have, some of them will have some specific restrictions on how we can spend them. And we can talk about those as we keep moving through the budget. Then the last couple pages here in tab B, there's our comparisons of our levies. We've shown these for a number of years. Based upon our current fiscal year, the most recent data that is available to us. So on page 14, we do a comparison of the consolidated levies. So this is all your levies, county, city, school, everything, by our, what we call our peer cities, cities that are population 8,000 to 12,000. We fall right in the middle of that 10,000 range. We are the lowest for fiscal year 19 at a consolidated rate of $26.90 for $1,000 in taxable valuation, compared to highest in a community for $46.13. So there's quite a bit of a swing between these communities, and we are the lowest for our consolidated rate.
Laura, would it be possible to get from the same source that you pull this, the valuation of property across these comparative cities? Do they have that or not?
Yes, that would be available.
I might like to see that sometime, please.
We've looked at a little bit of that information. Not that I pick on them, but like Denison is a good example where a house in Carroll is going to be average house is like $125,000. In Denison, it's $95,000. And when you apply your actual property tax calculations against those value homes, for the average home, you're going to pay about $120 less in property taxes in Carroll than Denison, and you have a higher value home. So all those components, I mean, they make a huge difference.
It does, doesn't it?
The other thing I'll throw out there, because it's pretty common, is Crawford County also charges for their hospital and medical services. Our county does not, because of the situation we have with our hospital. So that also helps. And if you look across the board at the rest of those communities, they all have state-run or city-run or county-run hospitals, which adds to their levy rate. We don't have that.
No, there's
And there's other things too. There's some other things too that also contribute to that. But I think that seems to be one of the number one things is services of a hospital.
Well, I think your industry has a lot to do with it. I mean, these are, if you look at the towns with the low amount, they have a lot of industry. Remember, they're taxed at 100% or 90%.
90%, yep. So that's the comparison of the consolidated rates on page 14. On page 15 is looking at the city levies only. We are the second lowest at $1.60. Once again, for fiscal year 18, the current year we're in, the most recent data that's available to us. The lowest rate is $10.20, all the way to the highest of $19.06. So quite a bit of gap in there as well. Same comparison of cities as we had on the other page, that 8,000 to 12,000 population, based upon the 2010 census, which we're gearing up for the 2020 census. Hard to believe.
So you could do a per capita levy. Oh,
Yeah?
no. Others have brought up that. I will just leave that alone.
Okay. But that's a pretty broad overview of our levies, our taxable valuations and what they've done year over year, comparing our levies to other communities, what the proposed levy rate's going to do to some different types of property, commercial versus residential in the community. Any thoughts, questions, comments, information? Well, you've made one comment about some information you'd like.
Yeah, that comparison evaluation, that probably isn't too bad, so we can kind of apples to oranges type thing, see what you got.
I wanted to make sure it was at least one other page that Laura had to add into the book at some point.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of good information at uscensus.org that you can
The
grab
taxable
that for the
valuation
cities,
stuff
counties.
is on the Iowa Department of Management's website, not revenue management. That webpage becomes near and dear to city clerks when it comes to budget time, finding our valuations, but that information is out there if you just Google Iowa Department of Management. They also have a history of tax levies. That's where I get the levy information.
Oh, okay.
past history of budgets, maybe? Budgets might be out of that, yeah, back to file with them. So budgets, so bunch of information about cities out there and past history.
One of the things we've really been working on too is getting more transparency in our financial documents. It's one of the things we've started when I came was a finance page. So if you go to cityofcarroll.com/finance, you're going to see our budgets, and there's links to Department of Management right off of it. So really, it is becoming, we're trying to make it more useful, so we're transparent. Our audits are up there. We have links to the state auditor, so you can see older documents and verify, yes, what we have on our website is actually what the state has. So, you know, we hopefully that'll become a good tool for the public.
And as always, you can always stop by City Hall for any and all of that information.
That's right.
Their eyes glaze over, they tell me. They try and figure it out, yeah.
You're going to get
It's-
TP tonight.
You're not associated with this, probably.
But you're right, an audit report for a city
Oh.
is put together way different than a business,
I get,
any other type of business audit
they
report.
go and look, and it's like, you know, need
Well,
to,
Eric, these
you need to go to
hospital
Mike and.
assessments, are they done through the counties, do you know? Right?
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
you're the one that,
Unless you have like Manning has a city hospital, so I think they have to pay.
they have to pay some,
They pay a city tax down there.
okay?
But like Crawford County, it's gonna be a
It's through their
county.
county
tax.
budget,
The whole
not their
county will
city.
pay, yeah. But again, that person in the city is gonna pay twice.
But it won't show up on that document that compares city property taxes.
You know, I don't know.
Consolidated, it
Total,
probably.
but not on the city.
Be consolidated, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, on the consolidated levy part, it would show.
Then it would
yeah.
show.
Right. Jack was kind enough to cook dinner and bring it up. Do you want to take that break? Because we'll get that done and then we can go right into Suzanne unless anybody else has questions with Laura.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I think that way, then we'll just go right in. We'll all be asleep when you talk, then sorry.
No.
No, we'll get that done and then we can get start back on it again. Yep, thanks.